Week 2 of the NFL season has come and gone, and it has brought us a whole bunch of new gifts. Peyton Manning reincarnate. We got a brand new star wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins. So many fun things to get to. But this week on DFS Early Look, we are going to give you the earliest look that you can get around the entire league. Lock in, because Jake Tribbey is about to get you right for week 3.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Yes, this is the DFS Early Look brought to you by FantasyPoints.com. We have one of the GOATs in the DFS space who sits here every single week and does the impossible. He gets you the earliest look at DFS slates, well, then you can get anywhere else in the business because he's an animal. He stays up late, so we decided to bring this to you. If you're watching this, hit like and subscribe, leave a comment, let us know your favorite plays for this week. But Mr. Jake Tribbey, what amazing options we have this week. Let's start with who I mentioned at the top, Peyton Manning coming out of retirement and playing for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, it is absolutely absurd what Derek Carr has done for New Orleans, and he's only priced as the QB 12 this week on DraftKings at 5,800. The Saints have scored on all 14 of Derek Carr's drives this season. They're averaging an absurd 45.5 points per game. That's 11 more points per game than the next closest team. Over the past 5 seasons, the quarterback of the league's highest scoring team has finished no worse than QB 8 by fantasy points per game, collectively averaging 23.7 fantasy points per game. To put that number into perspective, it would have led all quarterbacks last season. Now, of course, Derek Carr isn't nearly as talented as some of the quarterbacks who have led those high-powered offenses like Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, but he doesn't need to be to smash for fantasy. Play action and pre-snap motion have long been 2 of the biggest cheat codes in the NFL, and New Orleans is utilizing both at top 3 rates after being in the bottom 3 last season. Carr is effectively playing offense on easy mode, and he's averaging an absurd 1.12 fantasy points per dropback as a result. Now, the best ever season for fantasy points per dropback was 0.91 by Lamar Jackson in 2019. If Derek Carr can maintain even 80% of this efficiency moving forward, he will easily finish as a mid-range QB1, which makes him a steal in DFS, priced as the QB12 on this week 3 main slate.
And obviously, he always seems to have this kind of mid-tier QB2 stink on him. If he carries this on, I imagine a discount for a majority of the year, as everyone else is just going to take so long to actually believe it. Let's talk about running backs. Look, I mentioned the star wide receiver in Miami, and look, you do have him written up, and you will need to go to FantasyPoints.com to check out what we are talking about. But let's talk about the new star in San Francisco. And with some breaking news as we were about to go on, things are looking even more up for Jordan Mason.
Yeah, they are. He's just 6,200 on DraftKings, and I'm really not sure why they're inviting 50% ownership on Mason for the second week in a row, but here we are. He's 4th among running backs in snap share, 2nd in carry share, 8th in route share, and 8th in DraftKings fantasy points per game. He's one of the most glaring values of the week, priced as the RB14, and he faces a Rams defense in what should be a fairly favorable matchup. The Rams are 2nd in points per game allowed thus far, and their run defense really doesn't look much better. They've allowed the 3rd highest yards per carry, the 5th most yards before contact per attempt, and the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. San Francisco is favored by 7.5 points in this game, which means Mason should avoid any issues with potential negative game script. He has just 2 targets this season. Or, you mentioned the breaking news, Thomas, you could argue that he can still get there in negative game script because he's dominating backfield routes, as I noted earlier, and short area target Deebo Samuel is likely out a couple of weeks. And Deebo was also stealing some backfield carries from Mason, who profiles as a great play again this week, but I would expect his tournament ownership to reflect that.
It's going to be hard to be in a negative game script when the Rams just keep losing everybody. Cooper Kupp, he's on the IR as well. All signs looking real good for Jordan Mason this week. Your next player makes me and all my lineups very sad, but let's talk about why it should make you very happy in DFS lineups this week in Seattle.
Yeah, similar to Jordan Mason, DraftKings just did not price up these backup running backs who are seeing elite workloads. And Zach Charbonnet had an incredible workload last week, and he's priced as the RB17 on DraftKings, the RB19 on FanDuel. So a big glaring value there. He led all week 2 running backs in snap share at 99%. The next closest was 84%. And he ranked second in route share, 10th in expected fantasy points, and 10th in DraftKings fantasy points. Now, the amount of playing time Charbonnet just saw is legitimately rare and incredible for fantasy. Snapshare is one of the stickiest and most predictive stats at the running back position, and there were only 4 instances during the 2023 regular season where a running back produced a higher single game snapshare than what we just saw from Charbonnet. If we assume Ken Walker's absence extends into week 3, and most injury experts are suggesting it could, Charbonnet will be one of the slate's best values, especially as a 5.5 point favorite against a Skylar Thompson-led Dolphins team.
Yeah, Miami's just really nerfed into the ground. I definitely want that run game. Speaking of players who have been absolutely nerfed into the ground, I am surprised the first wide receiver we're going to talk to is on this list because it has been hard to watch in Cleveland. But you have Amari Cooper on here.
I do, yeah, and I was a bit surprised to write him up as well, but Cooper is among the most glaring buy lows in fantasy football right now. He's 11th among wide receivers in the best stat that we have, which is expected fantasy points per game, but he's the wide receiver 82 by actual fantasy points per game. Now, I totally understand the concerns over Deshaun Watson looking completely washed. I mean, he's 29th in passer rating, but Cleveland's passing attack could have a much easier time against a relatively weak New York Giants pass defense. The Giants have allowed the 5th highest yards per attempt, 6th highest passer rating, and the 4th highest completion percentage over expectation, despite facing Sam Darnold and Jaden Daniels. If this passing attack can get it together, this could be a smash spot for Amari Cooper, who is a great value on both sites, especially on FanDuel, where he's priced as the wide receiver 35. I understand the production hasn't been there, but the usage is just far better than the price tag right now.
Agreed. And eventually they're going to have some offensive tackles in Cleveland, which should help. We don't know when that is, but it should help. Speaking of everyone in LA at playing wide receiver, dropping like flies, we have kind of a deep play here, but one that could pay off in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be looking at all of these Rams wide receivers now that they're missing their top 2 targets. And that really starts with Demarcus Robinson, who's only priced as the wide receiver 40 on DraftKings at just $5,000. Every Rams pass catcher is going to pop as a value. Again, Cooper Kupp suffered the high ankle. He's likely to miss a decent amount of time. And Puka Nacua is currently on IR. And Demarcus Robinson does stand out as the top receiving threat left on the team. His 5.5 targets per game in 2023 and his 18% target per route run rate over his last 5 games lead the remaining healthy starters on the roster. Regardless of what you think of Robinson's overall ability, he's the best at earning targets of the guys who are still standing. And this is an incredibly valuable offense to earn targets in. The Rams ranked 3rd in wide receiver fantasy points last season, and they've been top 2 thus far in 2024. We can't expect them to be as productive without their 2 best wide receivers, but we can expect Robinson to see far better volume than his salary implies as a 7.5 point underdog to San Francisco.
Remember, it wasn't that long ago where Matthew Stafford carried Kenny Golladay to a fat contract. Stafford is a wide receiver maker, and we just have to hope that we have the right one for our DFS lineups. And I think, Jake, you narrowed down the perfect one. Let's talk about, let's just face it. He's the best tight end in football right now. Tight end has been a position that has been dog water to the point where we saw Mike Gesicki go off this last weekend, which I didn't think I'd ever see again. Who you have here, though, seems like he's priced way below where he should be for how much he just dominated Baltimore. Let's talk Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I always love an exciting young tight end, and Brock Bowers is certainly at the top of any exciting young tight end list. He's only 5,400 on DraftKings this week, priced as the tight end 5, a little bit cheaper on FanDuel where he's the tight end 6, but the usage profile has been truly elite. Through 2 weeks, Bowers is 2nd among tight ends in first read target share, 2nd in expected fantasy points, and 3rd in fantasy points per route run. He leads all tight ends in receiving yards per game, and he's the most efficient player in Las Vegas by any per route metric you want to use. Bauer's price hasn't quite caught up to his top 3 positional usage and production. And, as is usually the case for rookies, his workload should only go up as the season progresses. Remember, he was one of the greatest tight end prospects of all time, if not the greatest tight end prospect of all time. The potential that Las Vegas could blow the doors off Carolina, they are favored by 5 points here. Carolina has looked pretty rough through 2 weeks. That's the only thing that makes me hesitant about Bowers. Maybe Las Vegas won't be forced to throw a ton, but I do feel comfortable trusting this talent and usage profile at a mid-range tight end 1 price tag when arguably he should be the highest priced tight end on the slate.
Right. We're looking at upside always and as often as we can. If you enjoyed this preview and all the work that Jake Tribbey has been doing for your DFS early look, head to FantasyPoints.com, read the article. Link is going to be in the description. Get the full breakdown that Jake has written up for you guys. Jake, as always, it's been a pleasure. For myself, for Jake Tribbey, remember to be right back here for the earliest look at your DFS slates that you can get. See you guys at the top of the leaderboard.